What does it mean to lose everything and gain a fortune in the same breath? I'm Natalie, 27, a kindergarten teacher who, 6 weeks ago, lived paycheck to paycheck in a one-bedroom apartment cluttered with second-hand books and thriving plants. My grandparents, Elizabeth and Harold, raised me more than my parents ever did, teaching me to value character over cash in their modest home filled with the scent of fresh zucchini and warm cookies. They were wealthy, 26 million wealthy, but you'd never know it from Grandpa's worn pickup or Grandma's coupon-clipping habits. When they died in a horrific car crash, my world shattered. Then, at the will reading, I learned they left me their entire estate, sparking a firestorm with my family who barely visited them but now want everything. If you've ever seen money strip away masks, you know the chaos I'm facing. I'm writing this from my grandparents' quiet house, the air heavy with their absence, wondering how love and loyalty became a battleground. Where are you reading this from? Share your thoughts below, and if my story resonates, hit that like button and subscribe for more about standing firm when family reveals their true colors. Growing up, my parents, Richard and Diane, were shadows in my life, always chasing status. Dad with his corporate climb, Mom with her socialite lunches. Family dinners were rare, interrupted by phone calls or their distracted glances at watches. They provided food and shelter, but warmth came from my grandparents' 4-bedroom house, where I spent weekends and summers from age 5. Their 3-acre property was my playground. Grandpa Harold showing me how to plant tomatoes, Grandma Elizabeth teaching me to sew buttons while humming old jazz tunes. They built Alexander Logistics from a single truck in their garage to a regional giant with 200 trucks and 5 warehouses, yet lived simply, driving the same pickup for decades, buying clothes on sale. They attended every school play and soccer game my parents skipped, their cheers louder than anyone's. Their mantra, "Money's a tool, not your worth," clashed with my father's hunger for luxury. As their only son, he expected to inherit everything, resenting their frugality as stinginess. He demanded a senior role at their company with no experience. They refused, insisting he earn it. That rejection broke their bond, and he distanced himself, taking Mom and my brother Jason with him. Meanwhile, I stayed close to my grandparents. They paid for my college, letting me graduate debt-free, and cheered when I chose teaching over a high-paying career. My $30,000 a year job at Sunshine Elementary barely covered my rent. But I loved shaping young minds, reading library books, hiking, and volunteering at the animal shelter. Sunday dinners with my grandparents were sacred, me helping them set up smartphones, them sharing stories over homemade lasagna. My parents saw my choice to stay with them during holidays as a betrayal, but their coldness only pushed me closer to the warmth of that vegetable garden and creaky porch swing. 6 weeks ago, everything changed. I was grading spelling tests when the police called. A drunk driver had run a red light, killing my grandparents instantly. The officer's voice was kind but clinical, saying they didn't suffer. Yet grief hit me like a tidal wave. The funeral was a haze, my parents arguing over costs, Jason glued to his phone, Aunt Pam's crocodile tears for the cameras, Uncle Steve lingering silently. None of them had visited in years, yet they played the grieving family, while I felt hollow, unable to step into the house that once meant home. Back in my cozy apartment, I took bereavement leave, staring at my plants, wondering how to move forward without the 2 people who truly saw me. Then came the call from Matthew Goldstein, my grandparents' attorney, summoning me and my family for the will reading. I drove to his office on a drizzly morning, clutching Grandma's old umbrella, my stomach knotted with dread. The Victorian building smelled of polished wood, and Matthew's kind eyes offered brief comfort. My family arrived in a flurry. Dad checking his Rolex, Mom clutching a designer bag, Jason in wrinkled clothes, Aunt Pam loud on her phone, Uncle Steve trailing like a ghost. Dad's impatience, "Let's get this over with," set the tone, and I braced myself, sensing the storm brewing. The will would reveal more than assets. It would expose hearts. I had no idea how right I was, or how quickly their greed would turn my life upside down, forcing me to choose between their demands and the values my grandparents died believing in. As we settled around the large oak table in Matthew's conference room, the air thick with unspoken expectations, my mind drifted back to the roots of this family's fracture. My father positioned himself at one end like a king on his throne, while I chose a seat near Matthew, seeking some anchor in the storm I sensed brewing. The others arranged themselves in their usual cliques, Mom beside Dad, Jason slouching next to her, Aunt Pam chattering quietly to Uncle Steve across from them. Matthew cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses, and reminded us that my grandparents had been of sound mind when updating their will last year, their wishes explicit and considered. Dad snorted, waving it off with a demand to just read it, assuming the standard inheritance for the son who built nothing but resentment. But as Matthew opened the leather portfolio, I found myself lost in memories of how my grandparents' legacy had been forged, and how that very success had sown the seeds of division with my father, a rift that now threatened to swallow us all. My weekends with Elizabeth and Harold were escapes into a world of simple joys and profound lessons, far from the sterile ambition of my parents' home. Their house, with its wraparound porch and the faint scent of earth from the vegetable garden, felt like a sanctuary. Grandpa Harold would wake me at dawn for gardening, his calloused hands guiding mine as we planted rows of tomatoes and zucchini, explaining how patience and care yielded the best harvests. "Life's like this soil, Natalie," he'd say, crumbling dirt between his fingers. "Rich not from what you pour in quick, but from what you nurture over time." Grandma Elizabeth complemented those outdoor lessons with indoor warmth, teaching me to bake chocolate chip cookies from scratch, the kitchen filling with buttery aromas, or to sew buttons onto old shirts. Her needlework precise and stories endless. They shared tales of their youth, like how they met at a community dance in the 1950s. Harold, a young truck driver with big dreams. Elizabeth, a bookkeeper who saw potential in his grit. Together, they started Alexander Logistics in their garage, scraping together savings for that first truck amid economic hardships of the 1970s. I learned later, through family whispers, how they faced near bankruptcy twice. Once when fuel prices skyrocketed, another when a major client defaulted. But they persevered by treating employees like family, sharing profits during lean years to keep everyone afloat. By my birth, the company had grown into a powerhouse, yet they never flaunted it, clipping coupons and driving that battered pickup as if extravagance was a sin. Their philosophy shaped everything. Money as a tool for building meaningful lives, not for show. They funded community projects quietly, a new playground at the local park after seeing kids play in unsafe lots, or scholarships for employees' children pursuing trades. One summer, I remember helping Grandma organize a charity bake sale for the animal shelter where I volunteered. She baked dozens of pies, insisting we donate all proceeds anonymously. "True giving doesn't need applause," she'd whisper, her eyes twinkling. This humility clashed sharply with my father's worldview. As their only son, Richard grew up expecting the world on a silver platter, resenting their insistence on earning his way. They paid for his college, but made him work summers at the company warehouse, loading trucks alongside laborers, a humiliation he never forgave. After graduation, they helped with a down payment on a modest home, but he demanded a luxury condo, calling them cheapskates when refused. The breaking point came when he pushed for a senior position at Alexander Logistics, fresh out of school with no experience in logistics. "I've got your blood. That's qualification enough," he argued. But Grandpa stood firm. "Positions are earned through sweat and smarts, son, not inheritance." Dad stormed out, vowing to make it on his own, landing a corporate job that fed his ego but starved his soul. From then on, visits dwindled. Holidays became tense affairs where he'd criticize their old-fashioned ways, like the time he mocked Grandpa's truck during a family barbecue, suggesting they upgrade to impress neighbors. Mom enabled it, prioritizing her social circles over bridging the gap, while Jason absorbed the entitlement, bouncing between schemes without commitment. In contrast, my grandparents invested in me differently, fostering passion over profit. They covered my education fully, thrilled when I chose teaching, even adding funds for classroom supplies when my salary stretched thin. Our bond deepened in adulthood, me introducing them to video chats, them passing down family recipes like Elizabeth's lemon bars, which Matthew mentioned missing. But this closeness fueled family friction. Mom accused me of favoritism during holidays I spent with them, her voice laced with jealousy over my rejection of her lavish gatherings. Little did I know, these dynamics had been simmering for decades, documented in ways that would soon surface. As Matthew began reading the formal language, revoking prior wills, appointing executors, my family fidgeted, impatient for the payout. Finally, he reached the bequests, the entire estate, $8 million in cash, $12 million investments, $5 million residence, and the logistics stake, all to me, Natalie Grace Foster. The room froze. No provisions for Richard, Diane, Jason, Pam, or Steve, as they'd been provided for in life. Dad lunged for the document, shouting it was ridiculous. Mom sneered at a teacher handling such wealth. Jason demanded startup funds. Aunt Pam accused manipulation. I sat stunned, the figures blurring as shock washed over me. $26 million from my modest grandparents? Matthew retrieved the will calmly, announcing a video message. The screen flickered to life with Elizabeth and Harold on their sofa, looking vital and composed. Grandpa spoke first. If you're watching, we're gone, but we want to explain clearly. Grandma continued, expressing love for their children but disappointment in their materialistic values, passed to all but me. They detailed decades of neglect, missed events, unpaid loans, disdain for their lifestyle. The business wasn't about wealth, Grandpa said, but security and fairness. They praised my genuine care, my teaching career, trusting me as steward. To this, they added hopes for education and community use, areas they'd wanted to expand, but time-limited. As the video played, new memories flooded me. A winter when Grandpa secretly paid for a neighbor's heating bill during a cold snap, or Grandma tutoring local kids in reading, embodying their tool for good ethos. The rift with Dad echoed in a fresh recollection. A heated argument I'd overheard as a teen, him demanding investment in a risky venture, them refusing, him storming off with threats to cut ties. It all crystallized why they'd chosen this path, protecting their legacy from those who'd squander it. The screen darkened and chaos erupted, Dad declaring senility, vowing to contest, Mom turning sweet, urging sharing, threats flying. Matthew touched my arm. No decisions today. He handed me an envelope with documents, keys, advisors' contacts. The meeting dissolved in accusations, Dad grabbing my arm outside, demanding I come to their house that night to sort it. Numb, I nodded, driving aimlessly afterward, the envelope unopened, terrified of the burden. At 5:45, I arrived at their granite mansion, everyone waiting in the formal living room, scotch in Dad's hand, the air charged with calculation. The formal living room in my parents' 5,000-square-foot house felt like a courtroom, all cold granite and glass, designed to impress rather than comfort. I clutched the envelope Matthew gave me, its weight anchoring my racing thoughts, as I faced my family's expectant stares. Dad stood by the fireplace, sipping scotch, his face set in a familiar scowl. Mom perched on a stiff designer chair, her smile tight and practiced. Jason sprawled across the sofa, scrolling his phone, while Aunt Pam paced, muttering about her country club woes. Uncle Steve lingered by the window, avoiding eye contact, as if wishing to vanish. I chose a chair near the door, instinct warning me I might need an escape. The silence was heavy, broken only by the clink of Dad's glass. Then he spoke, his voice all business. "Sit down, Natalie. Let's be reasonable." I braced myself, knowing reason wasn't their goal, control was. The envelope burned in my hands, a lifeline to my grandparents' trust, as I prepared to face demands that would test everything they'd taught me about standing firm. The accident that took my grandparents replayed in my mind like a cruel loop. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind they loved for their quiet dinners at their favorite diner, where Grandma always ordered the meatloaf special. I was grading papers, red pen scratching out misspelled words, when the phone rang. The officer's voice was steady but somber. A drunk driver had barreled through a red light, hitting their car at full speed. "They died instantly," he said. "No suffering." The words were meant to comfort, but they carved a hollow space in my chest. I dropped the pen, paper scattering, and sat frozen, the world tilting. The funeral was a blur of insincerity. Mom arguing with the director over floral costs, Jason texting through the service, Aunt Pam's dramatic sobs stopping the moment cameras left. Uncle Steve stood silently, a shadow in the background. I couldn't bear to enter their house afterward, its warmth now a ghost. Back in my apartment, surrounded by my plants and thrift store lamp, I took leave from Sunshine Elementary, trying to process a life without their Sunday dinners, their laughter, their steady presence. The call from Matthew Goldstein, their attorney, pulled me from that fog, requesting my presence at the will reading alongside my family. I didn't know what to expect, but the urgency in his voice hinted at something monumental. Driving to Goldstein Legal that gray, drizzly morning, I gripped Grandma's old umbrella, a practical gift she'd insisted I keep in my car. The Victorian office smelled of polished wood and leather, a stark contrast to the sterile tension of my parents' home. Matthew greeted me warmly, his silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses offering a flicker of solace. "I'm so sorry, Natalie," he said, mentioning his chess games with Grandpa and Grandma's lemon bars, a detail that made my throat tighten. His genuine grief mirrored mine, a shared loss for two people who'd been more than clients to him. Before we could talk further, my family swept in. Dad's impatience palpable, Mom's designer bag a silent boast, Jason's sunglasses absurdly indoors, Aunt Pam loud on her phone, Uncle Steve trailing like a reluctant shadow. Dad's curt demand to start set the tone, his assumption of entitlement already grating. As we moved to the conference room, I felt the weight of their expectations pressing down, a storm ready to break. Matthew's calm professionalism held firm, but I sensed he knew more than he let on, his leather portfolio a Pandora's box about to upend everything. The reading began with formalities, revocations of old wills, executor appointments, my family shifting restlessly, eager for the payout. When Matthew reached the bequests, the room froze. $8 million in cash, $12 million in investments, their $5 million home, and a 25% stake in Alexander Logistics, all to me, their beloved granddaughter, Natalie Grace Foster. No provisions for Dad, Mom, Jason, Pam, or Steve, as they'd been provided for in life. Dad's chair scraped back, nearly toppling. He snatched the document, his face red with fury. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. Mom sneered. "A kindergarten teacher managing millions." Jason slammed the table, demanding startup funds. Aunt Pam accused me of manipulation, her voice shrill. I sat stunned, the numbers incomprehensible. $26 million from my coupon-clipping grandparents? Matthew, unfazed, retrieved the will and announced a video message. The screen lit up with Grandma and Grandpa on their familiar sofa, their faces warm and resolute, as if they'd known this moment would come. My heart clenched, seeing them alive again, their voices steady as they explained their choice. Grandpa spoke of their love for their children, but disappointment in their materialistic values, passed to all but me. Grandma added that I visited out of care, not greed, choosing a low-paying job to help children. They trusted me to steward their legacy, built on integrity and hard work, not status. They hoped I'd use the wealth for education and community, areas they'd championed quietly. As the video ended, Dad exploded, calling them senile, vowing to contest. Mom's tone turned sweet, urging me to share for the family. Jason scoffed, demanding I think fast. Aunt Pam's accusations grew wilder. I stammered, overwhelmed. "I need to think." Matthew intervened, handing me an envelope with documents, keys, and advisor contacts, advising no decisions today. The meeting dissolved into threats. Dad's hissed command to meet at their house that night, lawsuits promised. I left in a daze, driving aimlessly, the envelope unopened on my passenger seat. Rain streaked my windshield as I grappled with their betrayal, the fortune's weight, and the looming confrontation. By 5:45, I pulled into their driveway, their mansion looming like a fortress. Inside, their calculated stares told me this wasn't about family. It was about money, and I was in their way. The formal living room felt like a trap, the air thick with the scent of Dad's scotch and Mom's floral perfume, both sharp and suffocating. I sat clutching Matthew's envelope, its edges creasing under my fingers as my family's eyes bore into me. Dad's voice cut through the silence, smooth but commanding. "Natalie, this isn't right, and you know it." Mom nodded, her smile saccharine, while Jason smirked, still scrolling his phone. Aunt Pam's pacing had stopped, her glare fixed on me, and Uncle Steve stared out the window, as if distancing himself from the ambush. The envelope held keys, documents, and a promise of my grandparents' trust. But here, surrounded by their calculated demands, I felt like a cornered animal. My grandparents' video played in my mind, Grandpa's steady voice, Grandma's warm conviction, urging me to hold firm. But as Dad leaned forward, his tone hardening, I knew this night would test every lesson they'd taught me about standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. The will reading earlier that day had been a bombshell, its shockwaves still rippling through me. Matthew's calm reading of the bequests, $26 million in cash, investments, property, and the logistics stake, all to me, had silenced the room, only for chaos to erupt. Dad's face had twisted in fury, snatching the will to scan it, as if the words could change under his glare. "This is insanity," he roared. Mom's voice dripped with disdain. "A teacher handling that kind of money? She'll ruin it." Jason slammed his fist, demanding funds for his latest venture, while Aunt Pam accused me of scheming. Her voice shrill. "What did you do to them, Natalie?" I'd sat frozen, the numbers surreal. My grandparents, who clipped coupons and drove a rusty pickup, had amassed a fortune and entrusted it to me. Matthew, unruffled, had retrieved the will and introduced the video message, a lifeline I hadn't expected. Seeing Grandma and Grandpa on that screen sitting on their worn sofa felt like a hug and a heartbreak. Grandpa spoke first. "We're explaining this to avoid misunderstandings." Grandma followed, her voice soft but firm. "Richard, Pam, we love you, but your values disappoint us." They detailed decades of neglect, missed birthdays, unpaid loans, scorn for their simple life, contrasting it with my genuine care, my teaching career driven by purpose, not profit. "Natalie's the only one who lives what we built," Grandpa said, urging me to use the wealth for education and community, their lifelong passions. As the screen went dark, Dad exploded, calling them senile, vowing to contest. Mom's tone shifted to honeyed manipulation. "Natalie, darling, this isn't fair to the family." Jason scoffed. "Think fast, sis, or you're out." Aunt Pam's accusations grew wilder, claiming I'd brainwashed them. I stammered. "I have to think about this," my mind reeling from the betrayal and the fortune's weight. Matthew's hand on my arm steadied me. "No decisions today." He handed me the envelope, documents, keys, advisor contacts, and ushered us out as threats flew. Dad grabbed my arm in the parking lot, hissing, "Our house tonight, 6. We'll sort this." I nodded numbly, driving aimlessly afterward, rain blurring my windshield, the envelope unopened beside me. Memories surged. Grandma's lemon bars, Grandpa's gardening lessons, their pride at my graduation when my parents didn't show. Their trust in me was a beacon, but the family's greed loomed like a storm cloud. At their mansion, the tension was palpable. Dad began, "Your grandparents weren't thinking clearly. This money's for the family." Mom chimed in, condescending, "Managing wealth is complex, sweetheart. Your father knows best." They proposed I sign over the estate to Dad, offering me a generous 10%. Still millions, they argued, enough for a teacher. Jason demanded $5 million for his crypto scheme. Aunt Pam claimed the house for her kids' better schools. Their entitlement stung, but their tactics soon shifted to guilt. Mom's eyes welled. "After all we've done for you, this is your loyalty?" Dad's voice turned icy. "Sign voluntarily, or we'll contest, and it'll get ugly." I felt cornered, their words slicing through the values my grandparents had instilled. A memory flickered. Grandpa at 8, teaching me to stand firm on a playground. "No one takes your dignity unless you let them." Uncle Steve, silent until now, suggested giving me time, but Dad shut him down. "Stay out of it, Steve." Jason drafted transfer papers on his laptop. Mom called their attorney. Aunt Pam eyed the house online. They divided my inheritance without my consent, ignoring my grandparents' wishes. At 10:30, Dad slid a crude document across the table, demanding I sign away my rights for a vague percentage later. I read it, hands trembling, and took a breath. "No," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I won't sign. They trusted me for a reason." Mom's tirade about ingratitude followed. Jason hurled insults. Aunt Pam sobbed about her kids. Dad slammed his glass, cracking it. "You manipulated them, just like you're playing innocent now." His ultimatum came next. Sign and stay family, or take the money and be disowned. Their faces held no love, only greed. "I'm not signing," I said, standing. "I'm honoring their trust." Dad's response was venomous. "Get out. You're no longer welcome." Mom added, "Your lease is terminated. Our company owns your building." Jason smirked. "Better hurry, sis." I realized they'd planned this, using my apartment as leverage. Stunned, I faced the reality of losing not just family but my home in a single night. The words hung in the air, my lease terminated, my family disowning me over money they hadn't earned. I stood in my parents' sterile living room, the crack of Dad's glass still echoing, his ultimatum ringing, sign or be cut off. Mom checked her watch, cold as ever. 30 minutes to pack essentials, locks change tomorrow. Jason's smirk cut deeper. That money won't keep you warm tonight, sis. I moved on autopilot, heart pounding, up to the bedroom I'd rarely used since college. Dad stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching like a warden as I stuffed clothes and toiletries into duffel bags. Mom's voice drifted upstairs, already on the phone with a realtor about selling my grandparents' house. You were never really family, Dad said, his casual cruelty staggering. You were an obligation keeping us from divorce. Mom added, private school, braces, dance lessons you failed at. Consider this the end of our investment. I zipped my bags, fighting tears, refusing to break in front of them. Grabbing Grandma's quilt, I walked out, their silent line of anger and smugness following me. The door slammed, and in my car, tears finally came, sobs shaking me as I gripped the wheel, homeless and alone with a fortune I never asked for. I packed 4 bags in a daze: clothes, my teaching planner, a photo of me with Grandma and Grandpa at my graduation, their smiles brighter than the stage lights. Jason leaned in the hall, taunting, "You'll regret choosing cash over family." Dad's parting shot was colder. "Leave anything behind. It's trash or charity." The finality hit like a punch. They were erasing me. I drove into the night, rain streaking my windshield, no plan, no destination. Hotels were out. My credit card couldn't handle the hit. Friends were an option, but explaining this at midnight felt impossible. Then I remembered the envelope Matthew gave me, tucked in my passenger seat. Fumbling, I pulled out a set of keys with Grandma's rabbit-shaped keychain, glinting under the streetlight. My grandparents' house, now mine, was 20 minutes away. I hesitated, the thought of its empty rooms unbearable since the funeral, but it was my only refuge. The drive felt endless, memories flooding, Grandpa's off-key whistling, Grandma's lemon verbena scent. I pulled into their driveway, the porch light glowing on its timer, a small comfort. The key shook in my hand as I approached, the house smelling of wood polish and her potpourri, achingly familiar yet silent without their voices. Stepping inside, I half expected Grandma to call from the kitchen, offering tea. The silence was deafening. I dragged one bag to the guest room I'd always used, dropping it on the bed. My last visit's traces remained, a novel on the nightstand, fresh towels folded by Grandma, expecting my return. The thoughtfulness undid me. I sank onto the bed, crying until exhaustion claimed me, still in my clothes. Morning came too bright, the silence stark without Grandpa's coffee brewing or his humming. My phone buzzed with texts, Dad's threats to sue, Mom's fake reconciliation please, Jason's chilling enjoy the big empty house, not for long. Fear prickled, it sounded like a plan, not just anger. I forwarded it to Matthew, who replied instantly, "Stay there, I'm coming in 30 minutes. Don't open the door for anyone." His urgency rattled me, but it also sparked hope. Someone was in my corner. Matthew arrived with coffee and a briefcase, his silver hair catching the kitchen light as we sat at the breakfast nook. "Your family's already contacted attorneys to contest," he said, pulling out documents. "But your grandparents planned for this." He showed me a deed to a cottage Grandma bought 5 years ago, hidden in a trust Dad didn't know about. "You're not homeless," he assured me. Relief hit, but hiding didn't feel right. I wanted to honor their trust, not run. Then a knock came at the back door. Matthew smiled. "That's Carlos." I vaguely recalled the name, Carlos Ramirez, their estate manager for 15 years, living in the guest house. I opened the door to a man in his 50s, salt and pepper hair, holding his hat respectfully. "Miss Natalie," he said warmly, "I'm so sorry. I saw your car and wanted to check on you." His kindness nearly broke me again. "I'm overwhelmed," I admitted. He nodded, mentioning they'd asked him to look after me if anything happened. "The house, the grounds, everything's maintained," he said. Matthew invited him to join us, and over coffee, Carlos shared stories of my grandparents' generosity, fixing employees' cars, hosting barbecues for the neighborhood. Then he dropped a bombshell. "Your father and brother came after the funeral, took watches, jewelry, electronics. I have it on security cameras." My stomach twisted. Dad had installed the old system, but Grandpa, distrusting him, had Carlos upgrade it last year, catching everything. Matthew made a note. "This could be useful." Carlos led me to Grandma's study, revealing shelves of leather-bound journals, her elegant handwriting documenting family interactions. One entry from last year detailed Dad's demand for $250,000, his anger when refused, accusing them of favoring me. Natalie's never asked for a dime, Grandma wrote. Brings food every Sunday, stays to share it. Reading her words, I felt their love and resolve, a shield against the storm my family was brewing. As I closed Grandma's journal, her words echoing like a protective whisper, the doorbell rang, pulling me from the study. Carlos moved to answer it, his steps measured and alert, while Matthew glanced at his watch, as if expecting more arrivals. The morning light filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors, a reminder that the house, though empty of my grandparents, was filling with echoes of their foresight. Dorothy Reynolds entered, their housekeeper for 20 years, her practical dress and cardigan carrying the faint scent of lavender soap. She hugged me tightly, murmuring, "You look just like Elizabeth at your age," her voice thick with emotion. Over the next hours, more supporters arrived. Rosa Martinez, their business partner at Alexander Logistics, with her sharp eyes and laptop full of company details. George Patel, their investment advisor, portfolios in hand. Sarah Johnson, the longtime neighbor, bearing a casserole still warm from the oven. Each brought stories of my grandparents' quiet kindness, Rosa recalling how they funded employee scholarships, George detailing anonymous donations to local causes. The journals and footage, Carlos revealed, painted a damning picture of my family's greed. But this growing network showed me I wasn't alone. My grandparents had built a fortress of loyalty, ready to defend their legacy against the very kin who'd forsaken it. The discoveries in Grandma's study deepened as Dorothy helped sift through her desk, uncovering a hidden compartment with letters from Dad spanning decades, each a plea for money, some laced with threats to limit my access if refused. One from 5 years ago demanded funds for a surefire investment, warning they'd regret favoring that ungrateful girl. A USB drive held post-funeral footage, Mom rifling through jewelry, pocketing pieces with claims Grandma would have wanted her to have them. My stomach churned at the betrayal, but anger gave way to resolve. This evidence was armor. Around 4, as Matthew explained financial complexities at the dining table, my phone pinged. Jason's text. "Hope you're enjoying Grandma and Grandpa's house while you can. We're coming tomorrow at 10 to collect what's ours. Don't stop us, or it'll get ugly." I showed Matthew, his expression darkening. Threats and potential theft, time to activate their final plan. He made quick calls, speaking of evidence and meetings, then turned to me. "They anticipated this, Natalie. Tomorrow, we'll be ready." He urged reviewing the materials, journals chronicling Dad's demands, emails of Jason's schemes, videos of Aunt Pam's dismissive visits. As evening fell, supporters left promising returns, leaving Carlos as guardian. I pored over documents, seeing my grandparents anew. Strategic, compassionate, meticulous in protecting what mattered. Their preparations extended beyond paper. The upgraded security system Carlos mentioned included hidden cameras in every room, cloud-backed footage capturing not just thefts but conversations, like Dad's post-funeral mutterings about finally getting what's due. A fresh memory surfaced. Grandpa installing motion sensors last summer, winking at me, "For peace of mind, kiddo." Now I understood. It was for this. In the journals, Grandma detailed my visits with warmth. Natalie brought wildflowers today, helped weed the garden, shared stories of her students. She's the light we built this for. Contrasted with entries on Mom's rare calls, always circling money, it crystallized their choice. By bedtime, Jason texted again. "Sleep with one eye open, sis. Tomorrow shows what happens to thieves in this family." Instead of fear, I felt steel. Their threats only highlighted why my grandparents chose me. I woke early, anxiety buzzing, but determination stronger. Matthew arrived at 8 with coffee and pastries, plus legal folders. Restraining orders if needed, cease and desist for Jason's threats. Dorothy bustled in the kitchen, frying bacon, the smells evoking Grandma's hospitality. By 9:30, the house brimmed. Carlos at the door, Rosa at her laptop with financial proofs, others ready with testimonies. At 9:45, cars crunched gravel early. Dad's sedan, Mom's SUV, Aunt Pam's convertible, Jason's sports car, aiming to surprise. The doorbell pounded aggressively. Carlos opened it, unmoved by Dad's demand. "Where's Natalie? This is family business." He ushered them in, their smugness faltering at the living room gathering. I stood center, Matthew beside me, as the back door opened for more. Judge Robert Henderson, a dignified 70s friend who'd ruled against Dad before. Police Chief Maria Williams, whose daughter's education my grandparents funded. Thomas Jang, their financial advisor with incriminating records. Dad paled at the judge. "Robert, what brings you?" Henderson replied sternly, "Witnessing disputes per Harold and Elizabeth's request." Chief Williams added, "Here as a friend, unless crimes occur." 6 employees from the business entered, faces Dad knew from his entitled youth. Jason muttered, "Intimidation tactic?" I stepped forward. "You're here for what you think you're entitled to, despite their wishes. You can't bully me into it." Dad snarled, "Those fools were manipulated. We're correcting it." Thomas spoke, "Actually, Richard, we have records. Your 2016 unauthorized transfer attempt, 2018 forged check, last year's incompetence push after they refused Jason's funding." Rosa added, "And the $200,000 loan for your Aspen home unpaid since 2012. One by one, supporters presented evidence, journals of neglect, footage of thefts, emails of demands, contrasting with my documented care. Aunt Pam accused me of poisoning them. Judge Henderson countered with reviewed video journals showing no influence. Mom dismissed it as theatrical, vowing to contest. Matthew handed envelopes. "This evidence goes public if you do. Bank records, texts, videos." Uncle Steve paled reading his, urging Pam to leave. "We can't win." Dad went still, his shady dealings exposed. Chief Williams noted surveillance. "Any removal is theft." Carlos confirmed the system's reach. I distributed documents, cease and desist for threats, notices for stolen items return, terms for any future relationship, respect their wishes, and contests. Silence fell. They'd underestimated the network my grandparents built. Dad broke first. "This isn't over," but his voice cracked with defeat. Judge Henderson affirmed, "It is. Any judge would uphold this." They retreated, threats dissolving, cars vanishing down the drive. The room exhaled, Dorothy serving coffee as negativity lifted. Supporters congratulated me, but triumph felt hollow. I'd protected the legacy but lost blood ties. Judge Henderson's hand on my shoulder. "They'd be proud of your dignity." Rosa agreed. "You're like them. That's why they chose you." The tension in the living room was palpable, the air humming with quiet conversations, and the scent of Dorothy's fresh bacon mingling with brewing coffee. I stood at the center, heart pounding but posture steady, surrounded by the network my grandparents had woven over decades. Carlos by the door like a sentinel, Rosa tapping her laptop keys, Matthew shuffling legal papers. The clock ticked toward 10, but their cars had arrived early, a tactic to unsettle me. As the aggressive pounding echoed through the house, Carlos opened the door, his calm demeanor unshaken by Dad's barked demand. My family filed in, their expressions a mix of arrogance and surprise at the assembled crowd. Dad's eyes narrowed at Judge Henderson and Chief Williams, his forced joviality crumbling. Mom's brittle question, "Outsiders in a private matter?" hung unanswered as the employees entered from the back, forming a united front. Jason's mutter about intimidation tactics barely masked his unease. I stepped forward, voice firm. "I know why you're here, but you won't bully your way through this." Dad's snarl, "We're correcting an injustice," ignited the showdown, but my grandparents' preparations ensured this battle was already won, their legacy a shield exposing every flaw in their entitlement. The confrontation unfolded like a scripted drama, each revelation peeling back layers of my family's facade. Dad led the charge, his voice booming. "Those old fools were manipulated, we're taking what's ours." But Thomas Jang interjected smoothly, folder in hand. "Actually, Richard, documentation shows your repeated attempts, the 2016 unauthorized transfer from their retirement account, the forged check in 2018, and last year's push to declare Elizabeth incompetent after she denied Jason's funding." Dad's face flushed, stammering about context, but Rosa piled on, her tablet glowing. "Don't forget the $200,000 company loan for your Aspen vacation home, unpaid since 2012. They could have pursued it, but chose grace." The employees nodded, one recalling Dad's childhood visits turning into demands, another sharing how my grandparents covered medical bills for staff, while Dad ignored pleas for family time. Aunt Pam whirled on me, face contorted. "You snake, you poisoned them against us." Judge Henderson cleared his throat, his presence commanding. I've reviewed Elizabeth's video journals. No external influence. Their reasoning was clear and documented. Mom waved it off as theatrical, insisting they'd contest and win. Matthew distributed the envelopes then, his tone even. Review this first. It includes banking records, texts, emails, and footage that would become public in court. Uncle Steve opened his first, paling at the contents. Perhaps records of Pam's own unpaid loans or dismissive emails, and whispered, Pam, we should go. This isn't winnable. She shrugged him off, but doubt flickered in her eyes. As the evidence mounted, the room shifted. Their aggression deflated under the weight of facts. Chief Williams chimed in, her smile thin. Remember, this property's under full surveillance. Removing anything without permission is theft. Carlos affirmed, upgraded system last year. Everything recorded, backed up to the cloud. A new detail emerged from Sarah, the neighbor. She'd witnessed Mom's post-funeral jewelry grabbed firsthand, offering to testify if needed. George Patel added investment logs showing Dad's attempts to access accounts prematurely, each rebuffed with notes from Grandpa. Richard sees dollars, not duty. I handed out my documents, cease and desist for Jason's threats, demands for stolen items return, and terms for any reconciliation. Respect the will, end all challenges, build genuine ties. This isn't vengeance, I said, meeting their gazes. It's honoring what they built. Silence fell, heavy and revealing. They'd come expecting a vulnerable teacher, not this fortress of loyalty. Dad scanned his envelope, his shady business dealings laid bare, transcripts of cruel remarks about his stingy parents, emails plotting to sway them. His shoulders sagged, the fight draining. This isn't over, he muttered, but the defeat in his tone said otherwise. Judge Henderson affirmed. It is, Richard. Their evidence is ironclad. No judge here would overturn it. One by one, they retreated. Jason glaring daggers, muttering, not the end. Aunt Pam huffing about unfairness, Mom clutching her bag like a shield, Uncle Steve guiding Pam out with quiet resignation. Dad lingered last, his eyes meeting mine in a mix of rage and regret, but he turned without another word. Their cars crunched away, the driveway emptying as quickly as their bluster had faded. The room exhaled collectively, tension dissolving into relieved chatter. Dorothy bustled with pastries and coffee, her hospitality a balm, while supporters offered hugs and words of pride. You handled that with grace, Rosa said, echoing Judge Henderson's earlier sentiment. Harold and Elizabeth would be beaming, you embodied their values. But as congratulations flowed, a hollowness settled in me. I'd safeguarded the inheritance, but at the cost of blood bonds, flawed as they were. The victory tasted bittersweet, like Grandma's lemon bars without her smile. Yet in that moment, surrounded by this chosen circle, Carlos sharing a story of Grandpa's quiet charity, Dorothy recalling Elizabeth's kindness, I glimpsed the true family they'd left me. One forged in respect, not obligation. As the group dispersed, promising ongoing support, I wandered the garden, zucchini vines twisting under the sun, feeling their presence in every leaf. The showdown had closed a chapter, but opened another, of healing, purpose, and carrying forward what money couldn't buy. The driveway stood empty now, the rumble of departing cars fading into the afternoon quiet, leaving behind a house that felt both victorious and echoing with loss. I watched from the porch as the last taillights disappeared, the supporters inside shifting from battle mode to gentle camaraderie, Dorothy pouring more coffee, Rosa closing her laptop with a satisfied nod. Judge Henderson's hand on my shoulder lingered, his words a quiet anchor. You've done them proud, Natalie. As the group dispersed with promises of check-ins and ongoing guidance, I wandered into the garden, the zucchini vines heavy with late summer bounty. A tangible reminder of Grandpa's lessons. The confrontation had drawn a line, severing ties that were already frayed, but in their place, my grandparents' community bloomed like the tomatoes we'd planted together. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of adjustment, the initial haze of paperwork and decisions giving way to purposeful steps, each one honoring their vision while healing the wounds of betrayal. My family made feeble attempts at contact, Dad's call about a short-term loan for his company, Mom's interest in the foundation board, once her friends heard, Jason's plea for startup cash after another flop, Aunt Pam's holiday hints about my large house. Each time, I held firm to the terms, mutual respect, no financial strings. They couldn't meet them, their motives transparent. So I focused on building forward, discovering that true family emerges from shared values, not shared blood. The Elizabeth and Harold Alexander Foundation took shape under Matthews and the advisor's guidance, with $10 million dedicated to education, scholarships for underprivileged kids, arts programs in schools, vocational training my grandparents had always championed but lacked time for amid running the business. I dove into the details, reviewing grant applications in Grandma's study, her journals open beside me for inspiration. One entry described a young employee they'd helped through trade school. "Wealth means lifting others," she wrote. The foundation's first grants funded classroom supplies across the district, echoing my own teaching days. To everyone's surprise, I returned to Sunshine Elementary, my kindergarten class a joyful constant amid the changes. With the inheritance, I enhanced it quietly, new books filling shelves, art supplies in every corner, daily healthy snacks for kids who arrived hungry, winter coats for those without. Parents noticed, one mom tearing up over her son's excitement about a field trip I sponsored. "You're making dreams possible," she said. Under Rosa's mentorship, I learned Alexander Logistics ropes, not micromanaging but ensuring their ethos endured, profit sharing, generous benefits, community involvement. The company thrived, its 100-plus employees sharing stories at a memorial picnic I hosted, toasting my grandparents' fairness. Their house transformed too. I renovated the basement into a foundation hub for workshops and events, Carlos overseeing grounds with his family joining Sunday dinners. Dorothy refused full retirement, her thrice-weekly visits keeping the home alive with her chatter and cleaning. New traditions formed with this chosen family. Rotating Sunday meals where Matthew shared chess anecdotes, Rosa discussed business ethics, Sarah brought neighborhood gossip. Holidays buzzed with genuine warmth, no underlying agendas. One crisp autumn morning, I visited their graves, flowers in hand, sitting on the bench as leaves swirled. "I'm honoring what you built," I whispered, detailing the foundation's impact. 3 full scholarships already awarded, changing lives like Maria Vasquez's, an aspiring teacher whose family worked double shifts. "Your employees still respect you deeply." The breeze felt like their approval, rustling trees in the fall light Grandma adored. I discovered more of their quiet charities, paid medical bills, saved homes, college funds, all anonymous, amplifying good without fanfare. The next day, the foundation's scholarship ceremony honored 20 seniors, Maria approaching me afterward. "This changes everything for my siblings too." In her eyes, I saw the ripple effect they'd envisioned, wealth as a tool for purpose. Money had revealed true colors, greed fracturing blood ties, but also illuminated a community of connection, more valuable than any sum. I continued teaching, managing the foundation, learning the business, living simply. Practical car, volunteer weekends, no extravagance. They would approve, their mantra alive in me. What's your experience with family and inheritance? Have you stood against pressure to do what's right? Share below, like, subscribe, and remember, family is love and respect, not obligation. Thanks for joining my story. May you find strength in your values. In the quiet months that followed, as leaves turned and snow dusted the garden, I found a softer rhythm in the legacy left behind. The house, once heavy with echoes, began to hum with new life. Children's laughter from foundation workshops in the basement, the aroma of Dorothy's casseroles during our gatherings. Each day, teaching kindergarten brought simple joys. Little hands clutching crayons I provided, their wide eyes reflecting the purpose my grandparents had nurtured in me. The foundation grew steadily, grants weaving threads of opportunity into the community fabric, much like the quilts Grandma sewed with care. Visits to their graves became regular whispers of gratitude, sharing updates on scholarships blooming into futures they would have cherished. My biological family's distant overtures faded, their absence a gentle release, allowing space for bonds forged in authenticity. Carlos and his family shared meals under the porch light. Rosa guided me through board meetings with patient wisdom, and Matthew's calls offered steady counsel. Holidays wrapped us in warmth without expectation, stories flowing freely around the table. As spring approached, I walked the property, tomatoes sprouting anew, feeling their presence in every budding leaf. A reminder that true inheritance whispers through actions, not accounts. Wealth, as they taught, is a quiet tool for kindness, its impact rippling softly onward. And in that softness I found peace, carrying their light forward, one compassionate step at a time.